Hi class, we're going to talk about the budget. And I'm going to try to help you to understand the budget crisis that's taking place in the government right now and the process that the government has to go through to create a budget. On the screen you see a donkey and you see an elephant. The donkey is a symbol for the Democrat Party, the elephant is a symbol for the Republican Party. A famous cartoonist in the 1800s, Thomas Nast, drew those characters for each of the political parties and they've stuck. And so the parties now use those symbols as their mascots. What is a budget? Well, a yearly budget, is the government spending for that year. How much does the government have to spend for that year? They're spending on things like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and Obamacare and military, interest on the debt, and other government expenses. Those are what a budget is. The government income are the taxes the government collects. The government has to collect taxes in order to cover the budget, but obviously, from this graphic, you can see that the government does not take enough money in taxes to cover their spending. They're spending more than they're taking in taxes. That difference is called a deficit. It's how much the government has to borrow to balance the budget. It's called a deficit. Now, we borrow money from other countries, as I said, mostly from Saudi Arabia and China. We borrow money from these other countries to make up the deficit. When we do that, they're going to want interest on that debt. They want interest. They want interest payments. They're not just lending us the money without any cost to it. They want us to make some money, so they charge us interest. That interest every year is added to the budget for the next year. So the interest keeps going up every year because we keep borrowing more money. And it's always added into the budget. It becomes a big part of the budget now. Now, what is government spending? Government spending is different types. There's discretionary spending, there's military spending, there's interest on the debt, as I just talked about, and there's non-discretionary entitlements. Mandatory entitlements have to be paid. This part of the budget is things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare, unemployment. Those are promises made to the people. You can't tell old people that they're not going to get Social Security anymore. They spent their whole life depending on that. And Medicare, likewise, or Medicaid, which is help for poor people to get medical care. All those things are promised to the people and they have to be provided. So they are mandatory entitlements. They're non-discretionary. You don't have a choice about it. You have to pay those, whether you want to or not. Likewise, interest on the money borrowed to balance the budget has to be paid. That's interest on the debt. You can't tell Saudi Arabia that we're not going to pay the interest next year, then they won't lend us any more money. So we have to pay the interest every year. And of course, military spending, like for the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, national security, those things are very important also, and the government has to spend money on those things. The one part of the budget that the Congress can change is called discretionary spending. So out of all that spending they're doing, the only part that they can really control is the discretionary spending. Let's look at a chart for 2015. Here's the 2015 federal budget. Notice that these are different categories. Here's net interest on the debt is 6%, interest on the debt. Other mandatory expenditures are 11%. Social Security is 24%, Medicare is 17%, Medicaid, which is help for poor people to buy medical care, that's 9%, 1% on Obamacare, and 10% on other mandatory military spending. Some military spending is locked in. For example, pensions and things are locked into the military. So everything from here all the way around to here is locked in. The government cannot control that. There's money they have to pay every year. They can't make a law and say they're not going to pay Social Security. That has to be paid. The only part the government has is now the non-discretionary spending, and they can make a decision in some military spending whether or not to develop a new weapons system or build new battleships or aircraft carriers. There is some discretion there, but not very much. So out of all that 22% is discretionary that Congress can change. 78% is locked in. Congress can't do anything about it. They have to pay that 78%. They only have time, they can only play with the 22% of the budget. How does the government create a budget? Well, first of all, the president proposes a budget. And if he has to get the Senate to agree. The Senate requires 60 votes or cloture. Why? Because the Senate, anybody can stop the budget in the Senate by just doing a filibuster. A senator can stand up, and once he gets the floor, you can't make him sit down unless you have 60 votes to tell him to sit down and stop talking. That's a cloture. Once they get that one senator to sit down, then you can push your budget through. But while that guy's talking, you can't get your budget across. You need 60 votes in the Senate to pass the budget. The House of Representatives only requires a simple majority. That's all it requires in the House of Representatives. And so you have the Senate Democrats, the House Democrats, and the Congress. So all three branches of government, the Senate, the House, or the Congress, is really controlled by the Democrats, including the president. But the Senate is a more thoughtful body, and they tend to take more time, and they're more deliberative than the House of Representatives is, and they usually tend to go a little bit slower, and so they sometimes have trouble getting the budget through the Senate in a more difficult than getting it through the House of Representatives. Now, liberals want to raise taxes to balance the budget. They know they have to balance the budget, and so liberals say, well, let's just raise taxes, and usually they want to raise it on the poor, on the rich, rather. Nancy Pelosi is a liberal Democrat. She's Speaker of the House of Representatives, and she just wants to clean that budget up by raising taxes. That's very simple. We'll just raise the taxes. And she usually wants to raise it on rich people. Rich people are usually considered, well, people making over $100,000 are probably considered rich by Nancy Pelosi and liberals. Conservatives, like Rand Paul, is a conservative Republican, a libertarian. He wants to cut spending to balance the budget. They have two different ideas. So the conservatives would cut spending and balance the budget that way. They both want to balance the budget. It's just what approach they take. Conservatives will cut spending. Liberals will raise taxes. Now, the budget stalemate can occur when both sides can't get together and agree. For example, the liberal Democrats frequently will refuse to cut their spending. We need this money for this project, whatever it happens to be. Conservatives will say, we're not going to raise taxes. We promised our constituents that we're not going to raise taxes. And they'll refuse to raise taxes. Sometimes that will end up in what is called a stalemate. They won't be able to move. They can't get the bill. They can't get the budget through Congress, and so they're locked in. They got a stalemate. That has happened in the past several times where we're operating without a budget. When that happens and you have a stalemate, you can end up with a government shutdown. Now, the government shutdown usually doesn't mean that they're not going to give out Social Security checks or Medicare checks. What they really means is they'll stop the national monuments will be off limits, and you won't be able to go to the national park system. They try to they try to make it affect things that are not going to hurt the people too much. But that's what a government shutdown with no budget. You have to have a government shutdown. The government can't operate without a budget. It's against the law. Now, liberals and conservatives are not evil people. Get that out of your mind. You want to stop hating liberals and you want to stop hating conservatives. It's a time to. They're not evil people. They both want what is best for America, believe it or not. But they have different philosophies about government. Their basic concepts of government are different. And that's what makes them different. Not that they're evil. They're not evil at all. Liberals would usually say, hey, what's the problem? We can get all the milk and cookies we want, and it's free. And the Democrats usually have, going back into the 1800s, they have a thing called Tammany Hall. The Democrats were built in the big cities in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. The Democrats, they made their way in the big cities working with minority groups and with immigrants, and they would spend a lot of money to help them. We'd give out free turkeys at Thanksgiving and Christmas and give other free things. And they had a thing called Tammany Hall, which worked on that, which did that quite a bit. You studied that in history. The Republicans, on the other hand, say, yeah, sure, we can get all the milk and cookies we want for free, but we have to give up our freedom. And what happens after we eat all the cookies and drink all the milk? So the Republicans are kind of thinking ahead a little bit, where the Democrats are kind of thinking in immediate times. Now, liberals say that government should be used to redistribute wealth and provide goods and services to the citizens. They want to give people everything. They want to pay for your college education. They want to pay for all kinds of things, give people cell phones. There's all kinds of things that the Democrats want and the liberals want to spend money on, and that's their philosophy. They want to redistribute wealth. That means to take it away from the rich and give it to the poor. And they want to provide goods and services to the citizens. Take care of your life. Make sure you have a good life. So if they're going to do that, that takes a lot of money. Where are they going to get the money from? Well, there's different ways they can get it. They can raise taxes to get the money to provide all these goods and services to people. Or they can just print the money. That's an easier way. Just print the money. Turn on the printing press and print out more $100 bills. What's the difference? Well, it has consequences. For example, if you just start printing money, you say $20 might buy this much groceries, but as you print more money, you are actually lowering the value of the money. And so you might end up eventually by printing money, your dollar, you have a shopping cart that has less in it for the same $20. You're getting less goods for your money. It means that the money is worth less. And so it really hurts people that are like on saving for their retirement, for example. If you have a person saving for their retirement, say they have $20,000 in the bank, well, when they start printing money and the money is worth less, if it's less valuable, that $20,000 might end up being just $10,000. Now they don't have enough for the retirement. So inflation is a very terrible thing because it cuts people's savings, it cuts people's ability to purchase, and it has other consequences as well. Whether it's tax increases or whether it's just printing the money, there are consequences. Usually the people have inadequate incomes. Because the money is worth less, they don't have enough money to feed their families anymore. So they have inadequate incomes. The wages usually go down in that case. The real value of wages goes down. Prices get increased because you have more money in circulation. Well, everything costs twice as much. Sometimes the companies will make shoddy products. They'll say, well, we're not making too much money. The taxes are too high. So let's just cut corners on our products we're making. We'll make them quite as good as we used to make them. Sometimes there's product unavailable and discontinuation. So, for example, if they're making a high-level car, high-end car, they might stop making that high-end car because it costs too much money to make and they can't sell them to get enough money back. Some people lose their jobs. There's foreclosures, evictions, sometimes homelessness. Poverty and crime increase. And there's chronic recession, chronic inflation and a chronic recession. Recession means a loss of jobs and money for the people. And there's low real tax revenue. The taxes they take in, once they start printing money, the taxes they take in isn't even worth as much. Conservatives say that unrestrained government spending will destroy the economy. Poor and middle-class citizens will suffer the most. So here's the economy. And the economy could crash if you just have unrestrained spending. It can cause inflation, taxes, lowered credit rating, no growth, unemployment, and debt. This guy says, well, on the plus side, we've seen it hit the bottom. Well, they could cause the economy to crash. When that happens, the poor and the middle-class people usually suffer most. Because rich people, they have enough money, they don't have to worry about it. But it's the poor people that are affected most by high taxes, by inflation, by unemployment, and by no growth and by debt. It's the poor people that always suffer in those circumstances. The Republicans realize that. So do the Democrats realize that. So liberals say that government should be used to redistribute wealth and provide goods and services. That's their theme. And it's a noble cause. You want people to have a good life. You don't want people to suffer. You want them to have good educations. You want it all to be free. We'd all like it to be free. Conservatives say that government should be used to protect your freedom. They don't believe it's that the government is supposed to take care of you from your cradle to the grave. They think that the main purpose of government is to protect your freedom. And in the words of Thomas Jefferson, who would be a conservative if he were alive today, a government big enough to give you everything you want is strong enough to take away everything you have. In other words, if the government is strong enough, has enough money to give you everything, it could be a dictatorship. That's what Thomas Jefferson say. Okay, guys, who should you trust? Well, talk these issues over with your parents and then make up your own mind. There's two people in the world that you can trust more than anybody else, and that's your mom and dad. They have wisdom, they've lived a long time, and you can trust them. Talk these issues over with your parents. Give their ideas, what they think, and trust what they say, and they'll help you to make up your mind if you're confused about the issue. I want to thank you for your attention. Thank you for your support. And you can visit our webpage at www.edtechnology.com. My email address is schneeman@outlook.com. Thank you very much.